Hello, my name is Danny Harmon. I will be giving a report on climate change. Recently, the United States joined Syria and Nicaragua as the only three nations out of the 242 involved to back out of the Paris Climate Agreement. The Paris Climate Agreement was the first agreement of its kind, as its sole purpose was to acknowledge the threat that climate change poses on our world. If we want to ensure optimal living conditions for future generations, more climate-conscious political agendas and ultimately climate-conscious cultures should be adopted. If something is not done to stop climate change now, future generations will have to deal with the consequences of our negligence. This speech will contain information on what climate change is, how it affects us, and what we can do to stabilize our world's climate. Climate change can be defined as the increase of average Earth temperature and the effects that come along with it. One of the most widely understood effects of climate change would be an increase in sea level. This increase in sea level would originate from the melting of the polar ice caps, which this massive amount of ice melting into the oceans would cause a displacement of water all across the globe, much like how dropping of ice cube in a cup causes the water to rise. The figure to the left shows a hypothetical situation of what would happen if the sea levels were to rise 6 meters. If sea levels were to rise 6 meters, Miami and New Orleans would both be completely underwater, effectively displacing millions of people to the inner United States. On a global scale, billions of people would be displaced, effectively affecting the entire world population in a way that we've never fathomed possible. Along with increased sea level, increased severity of the weather would come with the changing of the ocean's currents and the increased temperature of the ocean. Along with the increased temperature of the ocean, increased acidity of the ocean would also happen due to the increased carbon dioxide in the air. The increased temperature and acidity of the ocean would have incredibly detrimental effects to sea life. After coral reefs disappear, ocean food chains will effectively be completely destroyed, then greatly hindering all the cultures that depend on sea life for energy and food. In order to curb climate change, we must first understand how we as humans affect our climate. The major way humans affect climate change is through carbon emissions. Now, carbon is a byproduct from burning fossil fuels. As you can see in the figure to the left, carbon emissions have increased tenfold in the past 60 years. This increased carbon in our atmosphere creates the carbon in the atmosphere holds heat, therefore increasing the surface temperature of the Earth. This effect is known as the greenhouse. In reference to numbers, according to USGS Science for a Changing World, the burning of fossil fuels in the United States alone produces 1.6 gigatons of carbon byproduct annually, while uptake amounts are only about 0.5 gigatons, leaving a net product of 1.1 gigatons of carbon byproduct to be left in the atmosphere. All that carbon left in the atmosphere holds heat, and this happens every year. Now we can look into how humans can curb the effect of climate change. The obvious thing to be done to stabilize climate change would be to reduce carbon emissions. Now, in order to do that, we need to find alternative fuel sources that don't have carbon as a byproduct of their usage. One of these One of these products in research right now would be algae. Now, some algae, with particularly high biomasses, can be processed and then used as fuel for anything that utilizes an engine, much like how gasoline fuels our cars. Climate conscious political agendas, along with educating the public, can also have positive effects on stabilizing climate change. In retrospect, we have learned what climate change was, how it could possibly affect us, and what steps we could take in order to stabilize Earth's climate. If we want to ensure optimal living conditions for future generations, then climate-conscious political agendas and ultimately climate-conscious cultures need to be adopted, much in the way that the Paris Climate Accord attempted to do. I wanted to end this report with a quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson, a well-known astrophysicist. We just can't seem to break our addiction to the kinds of fuel that will bring back a climate last seen by the dinosaurs. A climate that will drown our coastal cities, wreak havoc on the environment and our ability to feed ourselves. All the while, the glorious sun pours immaculate free energy down upon us, more than we will ever need. Why can't we summon the ingenuity and courage of the generations that came before us? The dinosaurs never saw that asteroid coming. What's our excuse?